Lorenzo Castellano's hands were shaking as he rewound the security footage for the third time. 2:47 a.m. Every single night for 3 weeks. The same timestamp, the same woman, the same ritual that made his blood run cold. He'd installed the hidden cameras in his children's bedroom 5 days ago after his 6-year-old daughter Isabella had whispered something that stopped his heart. "Daddy, Jasmine comes to visit us when we're sleeping. Every night. She thinks we don't know." Lorenzo had hired Jasmine Brooks 8 months ago, vetted her background, checked her references, paid her triple the market rate because his twins needed stability after their mother's death. She'd been perfect, patient, loving, the kind of nanny who actually gave a damn. But now, watching this footage, Lorenzo's finger hovered over his phone. One call and his men would handle this. One call and Jasmine Brooks would disappear before sunrise. Because what she was doing to his children at 2:47 a.m. was unthinkable. 3 weeks earlier, Jasmine Brooks woke up at 2:47 a.m. the same way she'd woken up every night for 2 years. Choking on phantom smoke, her lungs burning, her mind trapped in a hallway that no longer existed. The nightmares were always the same. The fire, the screaming, the door she couldn't reach fast enough. The two small faces pressed against the window, their mouths forming her name over and over. Jasmine, Jasmine, Jasmine. She sat up in the guest house, her heart slamming against her ribs, her tank top soaked with sweat. For counts in, hold, for counts out. Her therapist's voice. The fire was 2 years ago. You saved them. You're safe. But her therapist was wrong about one thing. She'd saved Aiden and Aaliyah from the fire, but she hadn't saved them from their father. 6 months later, they were dead anyway. Murdered by the man who'd rather kill his own children than lose custody. And every single night since then, Jasmine woke up at 2:47 a.m. The exact moment the smoke alarm had gone off. Convinced she'd failed them, she pulled on her robe, slipped into her shoes, and did what she'd done every night for 8 months since taking this job. She walked to the main house to check on Lorenzo Castellano's twins. She knew it was obsessive, knew it crossed professional boundaries, knew that if Lorenzo ever found out, she'd be fired immediately. But the alternative was lying awake until dawn, imagining Marco and Isabella burning alive in their beds. The mansion's side entrance accepted her key code. The hallway was silent except for the tick of antique clocks. She climbed the stairs, her pulse racing, and pushed open the bedroom door. There they were. Isabella, 6 years old, curled on her side with dark curls spread across her pillow. Marco, her twin, on his back with his arms flung out, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Both breathing, both safe. Jasmine's knees went weak with relief. She knelt on the floor between their beds, the same position she'd taken every night for 8 months. First Isabella. She reached out with gentle fingers and found the pulse point on the girl's wrist. Counted. 62 beats per minute. Steady. Strong. Then Marco. Same thing. 68 beats per minute. Perfect. Both alive. Both safe. The tightness in Jasmine's chest started to ease. These weren't Aiden and Aaliyah. These children had a father who loved them, a home with state-of-the-art fire suppression, a future that was secure. She sat back on her heels and just watched them for a moment, letting the reality sink in. They're alive. They're safe. You didn't fail them. But then Marco's breathing hitched. Jasmine's blood turned to ice. It was nothing, just a small pause, the kind of irregular breath kids have when they're dreaming. But her trauma-wired brain didn't register nothing. It registered, something's wrong. He's dying. You're too late. Her hand shot out and pressed against Marco's chest, feeling for the rise and fall of his lungs. Still breathing, still fine. But her own breathing was coming faster now, panic clawing up her throat. What if he stops breathing and you're not here? What if there's a fire and you're asleep in the guest house? What if... Stop! She whispered to herself. Stop. He's fine. They're both fine. But her hand stayed on Marco's chest for another 30 seconds, counting his breaths, making absolutely sure. What Jasmine didn't know was that 3 doors down, Lorenzo Castellano was watching her on a monitor, and his face had gone white. Present day, 2:47 a.m. Lorenzo had reviewed the footage from all 3 weeks now. Every single night, the same ritual. 2:47 a.m. Jasmine enters the twins' room. 2:48 a.m. She kneels between their beds. 2:49 a.m. She checks Isabella's pulse, then Marco's pulse. 2:50 a.m. She watches them breathe. 2:51 a.m. She places her hand on each child's chest, like she's making absolutely certain their hearts are still beating. 2:53 a.m. She sits there, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20, just watching them sleep. Then she leaves. Every single night. To most people, it might look like a devoted nanny, someone who cared deeply about the children in her charge. But Lorenzo Castellano wasn't most people. He was the head of the Chicago Castellano crime family. He'd survived 3 assassination attempts, a federal investigation, and more betrayals than he could count. He knew obsession when he saw it. And this was obsession. The question was, what kind? Was Jasmine planning something? Was she working for one of his enemies? Studying his children's sleep patterns for a kidnapping? Was she mentally unstable, forming an unhealthy attachment that could turn dangerous? Or was it something worse? Lorenzo's mind went to the darkest places. The cases you see on the news. Nannies who hurt children, who suffocate them, He couldn't finish the thought. His finger moved toward his phone again. One call. That's all it would take. But then he watched the footage one more time, and he saw something he'd missed before. At 2:54 a.m. on the most recent video, after Jasmine had checked both twins' pulses and breathing, after she'd sat watching them for nearly 10 minutes, her shoulders started to shake. She pressed her hands over her face, and her whole body trembled with silent sobs. She cried like that for 3 minutes, completely breaking down. And then she wiped her face, kissed her fingers, and pressed them gently to each twin's forehead. Then she left. Lorenzo rewound that part and watched it again. And again. That wasn't the behavior of someone planning to hurt his children. That was the behavior of someone terrified of losing them. He closed the laptop and made a decision that went against every instinct he'd honed in 20 years of running a criminal empire. Instead of calling his men, he'd wait. He'd watch one more night. And this time, he'd confront her directly. He needed to know the truth. 2:47 a.m. Confrontation night. Jasmine woke up choking on smoke that wasn't there. The nightmare had been worse tonight. Aiden and Aaliyah's faces melting in the flames, their screams echoing in her skull even after she jolted awake. She stumbled out of bed, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie her robe. The panic attack was already building, squeezing her chest like a vice. Check on them. Just check on them. They're fine. They're always fine. Just check. She used her key code and entered the mansion, climbed the stairs, pushed open the bedroom door. Isabella and Marco were both sleeping peacefully, exactly like always. But this time, when Jasmine knelt between their beds and reached for Isabella's wrist to check her pulse, a voice spoke from the shadows. "What are you doing to my children?" Jasmine's heart stopped. She spun around and saw Lorenzo Castellano standing in the corner of the room, his arms crossed, his face completely unreadable in the dim light. "Mr. Castellano, Her voice came out as a strangled whisper. "I didn't mean to. I was just... You come here every night at 2:47 a.m. His voice was cold. "You check their pulses. You watch them breathe. You put your hands on them while they're sleeping." All the blood drained from Jasmine's face. "You've been watching me? I installed cameras. After Isabella told me you've been visiting them at night." Lorenzo stepped forward, and Jasmine scrambled to her feet, her back pressed against Isabella's bed. "So I'll ask you again. What are you doing to my children?" "Nothing. I swear. I would never hurt them." "Then explain it." His voice was deadly quiet. "Explain why you're sneaking into their room every night. Explain why you're touching them while they sleep. Explain why you're obsessed with them." Jasmine's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. She looked at the twins, still sleeping, thank God, and then back at Lorenzo, and she knew she had two choices. Lie and get fired, or tell the truth and get fired. She chose the truth. "I'm checking to make sure they're alive," she whispered. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. "Why wouldn't they be alive?" "Because," her voice cracked, "because 2 years ago I was a nanny for another family. Twins. A boy and a girl. 5 years old. And one night at 2:47 a.m., I woke up to screaming and smoke, and their father had set the house on fire." Lorenzo's arms uncrossed slightly. "I got the kids out," Jasmine continued, tears streaming down her face now. "Aiden and Aaliyah. I carried them through the flames and I saved them. But 6 months later, their father, who was fighting for custody, he murdered them both. Shot them while they were at a supervised visit. And I..." Her voice broke completely. She pressed her hands over her mouth to muffle the sob. "I wake up every single night at 2:47 a.m. convinced there's a fire. Convinced someone is hurting children. And the only way I can get back to sleep is if I check on Marco and Isabella. If I feel their pulses. If I watch them breathe. If I make absolutely certain they're alive." She looked up at Lorenzo with devastated eyes. "I know it's not normal. I know it's obsessive. I know I should have told you when you hired me that I have PTSD and nightmares and I can't function unless I check on them. But another sob. "They're all I have. Loving your children is the only thing that makes me feel like maybe I'm not completely broken. And I know you're gonna fire me and I deserve it. But please, please believe me when I say I would never, ever hurt them. I love them. I love them so much that I can't breathe unless I know they're safe." The room was silent except for Jasmine's ragged breathing and the twins' peaceful sleep sounds. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "Show me your arms." Jasmine blinked. "What? Your arms? You always wear long sleeves, even in summer. Show me." She hesitated, then slowly pushed up the sleeves of her robe. Her forearms were covered in scars, thick, twisted burn scars that ran from her wrists to her elbows. "From the fire," Lorenzo said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Jasmine's voice was barely audible. "I had to break through a door to get to them. It was covered in flames. The doctors said I'm lucky I didn't lose my hands." Lorenzo looked at the scars, then at Jasmine's face, then at his sleeping children. Finally, he spoke. "I've been watching the footage for 3 weeks. Every night you check on them. And every night after you check their pulses, you cry." Jasmine closed her eyes. "I know. I can't help it. I feel so relieved that they're alive. And so guilty that Aiden and Aaliyah aren't. And it overwhelms me." "Jasmine." Lorenzo's voice was softer now. "Look at me." She opened her eyes. "I'm not firing you." She stared at him. "What?" "I'm not firing you," Lorenzo repeated. "You're not doing anything wrong. You're not hurting them. You're protecting them. And after what you survived, after what you lost, I understand why you need to check on them. But I'm broken," Jasmine whispered. "I can't stop waking up at 2:47 a.m. I can't stop checking on them. I can't." "Then don't stop." Lorenzo crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she could see the genuine compassion in his eyes. "If checking on them at 2:47 a.m. helps you sleep, then check on them. I'll update your key code permissions. I'll make sure you have access whenever you need it." Jasmine couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Why? Why would you let me do this?" Lorenzo glanced at his children, and his expression cracked open with grief. "Because I do the same thing." Jasmine's breath caught. "My wife died 18 months ago," Lorenzo said quietly. "Car accident. And every night, I wake up multiple times and check on the twins. I check that they're breathing, that their hearts are still beating, that they're still alive. Because Sophia died and I couldn't stop it. And now I'm terrified every single second that I'll lose them too." He looked back at Jasmine. "So no, you're not broken. You're traumatized. And you're surviving the only way you know how. And I'm not going to punish you for loving my children enough to make sure they're safe." Jasmine started crying again. Huge, gasping sobs of relief and grief and gratitude all mixed together. And then Isabella's small voice cut through the darkness. "Are you guys done talking?" because it's really hard to pretend to be asleep this whole time." Both adults froze. Isabella sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. A moment later, Marco sat up too. "We know you check on us, Jasmine," Isabella said matter-of-factly. "We've known for months." Jasmine's face went red. You've been awake?" "Not every time," Marco chimed in. "But lots of times. You're not very sneaky. Why didn't you say anything?" Lorenzo asked his daughter. Isabella shrugged. "Because Jasmine was sad. And when she checks on us, she feels better. So we let her." She climbed out of bed and walked over to Jasmine, who was still kneeling on the floor. Without a word, Isabella crawled into Jasmine's lap and wrapped her small arms around her neck. "We know about the fire," Isabella whispered. "We know about Aiden and Aaliyah, and we're sorry they died. But we're not going to die, okay? We're safe. And you're safe. And you don't have to be scared anymore." Jasmine absolutely fell apart. She wrapped her arms around Isabella and sobbed into the little girl's hair, while Marco climbed out of his bed and joined the hug, patting Jasmine's back like she was the child who needed comforting. Lorenzo watched his children comfort the woman who'd been protecting them in the middle of the night, and something shifted in his chest. Something that felt like the first real breath he'd taken since Sophia died. 6 weeks later, 2:47 a.m. Jasmine woke up at 2:47 a.m., but this time she didn't panic. This time, she just got up, put on her robe, and walked to the main house like always. When she opened the twins' bedroom door, Lorenzo was already there, kneeling between their beds, checking Isabella's pulse, then Marco's pulse. He looked up when Jasmine entered, and he smiled. A small, sad smile that said, "I understand." She knelt down next to him, and together they watched the twins breathe. "How are you doing?" Lorenzo asked quietly. "Better." Jasmine's voice was steady. "My therapist says I'm making progress. The nightmares are less frequent. I don't panic as much during the day." "That's good." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Jasmine said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why did you really install those cameras? Was it just because Isabella told you I was visiting?" Lorenzo hesitated, then admitted, "The twins were acting strange, exhausted during the day, whispering secrets, and I've been burned before, betrayed by people I trusted. So when Isabella mentioned you coming at night, my mind went to the worst possible places. You thought I was hurting them. I thought you might be." He looked at her. "I'm sorry. I should have just asked you directly instead of spying." "No," Jasmine said. "You were protecting your children. I don't blame you for that." They were quiet again, and then Lorenzo said something he'd been thinking about for weeks. "Jasmine, you saved those twins from a fire. You gave them 6 more months of life. And yes, their father killed them, and yes, that's a tragedy. But those 6 months, that was because of you. You gave them 6 more months of bedtime stories and laughter and being loved. Don't discount that." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But it's more than anyone else gave them." Lorenzo reached out and took her hand. "And now you're giving my children something even more valuable. You're teaching them that love means showing up, even at 2:47 a.m., even when you're terrified, even when it hurts." Jasmine looked down at their joined hands, and she realized something profound. She was falling in love with this man, this widowed, grieving mafia boss who understood her broken pieces because his own pieces were just as shattered. "Lorenzo, I know," he interrupted softly. "I feel it too. This is a terrible idea. I work for you. You're my employer. This crosses every professional boundary. I don't care." Lorenzo's voice was fierce. "Jasmine, you've been holding my family together for 8 months. You've loved my children when I was too broken to love them properly. You've shown up every single night to make sure they're safe. You're not just an employee. You're..." "What?" she whispered. "Your family," Lorenzo said simply. "And I'm in love with you. And I know the timing is terrible and this is complicated and we're both still grieving people we lost. But I'm in love with you anyway." Jasmine stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Then Marco's sleepy voice cut through the moment. "Just kiss her already, Dad. We've been waiting forever." Both adults jumped. Marco was sitting up in bed, grinning. A second later, Isabella sat up too. "You guys are terrible at whispering," Isabella announced. "We can hear everything." Lorenzo started laughing. Deep, genuine laughter that he hadn't felt since Sophia died. "How long have you been awake?" "Since you started the mushy stuff about family," Marco said. "It was gross but also kinda nice." Isabella climbed out of bed and marched over to Jasmine and Lorenzo. "So are you going to get married or what? Because we want Jasmine to be our actual mom, not just our nanny who checks on us at night." "Isabella, it's not that simple," Jasmine started. "Yes, it is," Isabella interrupted. "You love us. We love you. Dad loves you. You love Dad. That's how families work." She crossed her arms. "Stop making it complicated." Lorenzo looked at Jasmine. Jasmine looked at Lorenzo. And then Jasmine started laughing too. The kind of laughter that comes from relief and joy and realizing that maybe, just maybe, healing is possible. "Okay," she said. Lorenzo blinked. Okay. Let's be a family." Jasmine smiled through her tears. "Let's figure this out together. Let's be broken and healing and terrified and brave all at the same time." Lorenzo pulled her into his arms and kissed her, soft and gentle and full of promise. The twins cheered and dogpiled onto them, and they all ended up in a tangle on the floor, laughing and crying and finally feeling like maybe everything was going to be okay. 3 months later, 2:47 a.m. Jasmine woke up at 2:47 a.m., but this time, Lorenzo's arm was already around her waist. "I'm here," he murmured. "They're safe." "I know," she whispered back, "but I still need to check." "I know. Let's go together." They walked to the twins' room together, checked pulses together, watched them breathe together. And when Jasmine felt the familiar panic starting to rise, Lorenzo took her hand and squeezed. "They're safe," he whispered. "Aiden and Aaliyah, you saved them from the fire. You did everything you could. And Marco and Isabella, they're safe because you're here, because you love them, because you refuse to let fear win." Jasmine looked at the sleeping twins, then at Lorenzo, and she realized something. She'd spent 2 years trying to save Aiden and Aaliyah retroactively, waking up at 2:47 a.m. convinced she could go back and do it better. But she couldn't save them. What she could do was love Marco and Isabella so fiercely that they never doubted for a single second that they were protected. "I think I'm healing," she whispered. "You are," Lorenzo assured her. "Slowly, but you are." 6 months later, Lorenzo proposed on a Saturday morning in the kitchen while Jasmine was making pancakes. No fancy production, no elaborate plan, just him holding his grandmother's ring and saying, "Marry me, be their mother officially, be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you how extraordinary you are." "I still wake up at 2:47 a.m. sometimes," Jasmine warned. "I know. I'll be there. I still have nightmares. I'll hold you through them. I still see their faces. Aiden and Aaliyah. It doesn't go away. It doesn't have to. They're part of your story." Lorenzo stepped closer. "But you get to have this too. You get to have us." Jasmine looked at the twins, who were grinning and giving her thumbs up. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." 1 year later, 2:47 a.m. Jasmine woke up at 2:47 a.m., but for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel panic. She felt Lorenzo's arm around her waist, heard the quiet house settling around them. She'd slept through the worst hour without a single nightmare. Lorenzo stirred. "Do you need to check on them?" "No," she whispered. "I think I'm okay." Yeah, I think I'm actually okay." He pulled her closer. "I'm proud of you, for surviving, for healing, for letting yourself love again even though it terrified you." They fell asleep wrapped around each other. And when morning came, Isabella and Marco burst in demanding pancakes. And Jasmine got up and made breakfast and listened to the twins argue and felt Lorenzo's arms wrap around her waist from behind and thought, This is what I survived for. Not to save Aiden and Aaliyah, though she tried with everything she had, but to find Marco and Isabella, to find Lorenzo, to find herself again after trauma tried to destroy her. And at 2:47 a.m., the time that had haunted her for 3 years, Jasmine finally found peace. Not because the trauma disappeared, but because she learned that love is stronger than fear. And sometimes the people who save us are the ones we thought we were saving. The twist you never saw coming. What made Lorenzo's surveillance footage truly unthinkable wasn't the 2:47 a.m. ritual. It was what happened on night 23. That night, at 2:47 a.m., Jasmine checked on the twins like always. But this time, after checking their pulses, she did something different. She pulled out her phone and showed Marco and Isabella photos of 2 other children. A boy and a girl, 5 years old. "These are Aiden and Aaliyah," she whispered to the sleeping twins. "They were my first babies, and they can't be here anymore, but you can. So every night I check on you for them. I love you for them. I protect you for them." She kissed her fingers and pressed them to each twin's forehead. "Thank you for letting me be your mom. Thank you for giving me a reason to survive 2:47 a.m. Lorenzo watched that footage and understood. Jasmine wasn't trying to replace Aiden and Aaliyah with his children. She was honoring them by loving Marco and Isabella with the same fierce devotion. The most unthinkable thing wasn't what Jasmine did to those twins at 2 a.m. It was how much she loved them, how fiercely she protected them, how she took her worst trauma and turned it into the most beautiful gift. A love so powerful it refused to let fear win. And in checking on them every night at 2:47 a.m., she didn't just save them. She saved herself. Subscribe to Mafia Romance Hub for more stories about people who survive the unsurvivable, who love after loss, and who find family in the most unexpected places. Drop a comment. Have you ever loved someone so fiercely it scared you? Have you ever had to heal from something that tried to destroy you? Tell me your story. This is Mafia Romance Hub, where the scariest thing isn't the mafia or the danger. It's letting yourself be vulnerable enough to love again.